It is my privilege to introduce an Ohioan who could well be an honorary Texan in just a few short weeks. On April 28th, he'll fight for all of us at the U.S. Supreme Court, and the power of his story and the discrimination he's faced may finally bring marriage equality to this state and to all 50 states in this country. Take a look at how Jim is fighting for us.
Go video.
An Ohio couple together for 20 years finally decided to get married this month because husband John Arthur is dying of Lou Gehrig's disease.
I was in a relationship with John for almost 21 years. John was one of the funniest, most well-spoken and charming people I've ever known. John and I met at a bar. A couple months later, John and his roommates were having a New Year's Eve party, and I went to the party and never left.
2011, John was diagnosed with ALS. The typical time frame is 2.5 to 5 years before death.
He was the love of my life. He was the person I committed to and would do anything for. We were watching the news, waiting for the Supreme Court decision to come out on Windsor, and the ruling was released, the decision read, and I just leaned over, hugged John, kissed him, and said, "Let's get married." We already felt married, and we wanted it to be a marriage that actually carried legal weight and legal respect.
Ohio still does not recognize gay marriage. Other states do.
Crossroads Hospice started to work with me to try to figure out how do we get John to Maryland, and very quickly realized a chartered medical jet was way beyond the budget. Because of our friends and family, the entire $13,000 cost of the medical jet was covered, because they wanted us to get married and they wanted to be part of it.
John Arthur passed away from Lou Gehrig's disease. Arthur and his same-sex partner, James Obergefell, were legally married in another state.
A federal judge in Cincinnati heard final arguments in a fight over gay marriage in Ohio. At issue, whether same-sex marriages should be recognized on Ohio death certificates, despite a statewide ban.
To be told that John's last record as a person would forever be wrong, it's a horrible thing to hear.
I couldn't think of a better thing to do. To live up to my vow. I do.
They were married in Maryland and sued to have Jim named as surviving spouse on John's death certificate.
It is a temporary order that compels Ohio to recognize their legal Maryland marriage.
Each side says it is prepared to appeal, and that next step will take this case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
If the Supreme Court rules in our favor, it's going to be just an incredible feeling of joy and of accomplishment. More than anything, I'm going to miss John. I really am. I'm going to wish he were here to know we won. HRC has just been phenomenal. This fight I'm in, they're on my side and they're there to help. It's not that they're fighting for special rights for us. They're just fighting for the same rights. I just hope that in June, if we do have marriage equality across the United States, that people don't suddenly decide, great, we've won. We have to make sure that we have the right to live our lives with the protections and the safety that all Americans should enjoy. It's all about equal rights, and marriage is a part of it, but it's not all of it. So we need to keep fighting.
The fight for marriage equality, it's getting really close to being done. I look forward to everyone being able to marry the person they love and to have that marriage recognized.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming HRC member and named plaintiff in the Supreme Court marriage equality case, Mr. Jim Obergefell.
I'm never going to get used to that.
I do. It's such a simple sentence, and yet it encompasses so many promises. 3 of those promises are especially important to me. I promise to love you. I promise to protect you. I promise to honor you. John and I made those promises and so many others, but for most of the more than 20 years we spent together, we never expected to say I do and have those words and promises carry any legal weight. Of course, that all changed in 2013 with the Windsor ruling. I know that meant the world for many of you here tonight, too. Suddenly, we could make those promises legal and have them recognized by our government. So we did. I do. I promise to love you. It wasn't love at first sight for me and John, but it was pretty darn close. We fell in love the 3rd time we met, and so we always like to say it was love at 3rd sight. We promised to love each other, and we kept that promise for almost 21 years. I do. Thanks. I do. I promise to protect you. We did all those things you do to keep a loved one safe, happy, and healthy. John's diagnosis with ALS in 2011 certainly upended our world, but it also reinforced the importance of this promise. I never expected to be a caregiver before the age of 50, especially not for the love of my life. But I can think of no better way to keep my promise to protect my love than to care for him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, when he could no longer do that for himself. As John's health took a turn for the worse, we made the decision to get married. As you saw in the video, it wasn't too glamorous, just your typical romantic ceremony on a Baltimore tarmac. But I've never loved John more than I did that day. I do. I promise to honor you. Honoring someone means many different things. It's those little things, like how you talk to and about that person. It's big things, like how you celebrate life events. It's how you remember that person when they're gone. Many people honor a loved one in a cemetery, and that was always John's wish. He loved a particular cemetery in Cincinnati, partly because it's an absolutely beautiful and peaceful place, but more importantly because his family plot is there. So it seems obvious that I would honor John with a memorial on his family plot, doesn't it? But I can't. When John's grandparents purchased the plot, they added a provision that only direct descendants and legally married spouses could be married or memorialized on that plot. Because the state of Ohio to this day refuses to recognize our marriage and wants nothing more than to dishonor our relationship, I can't be memorialized alongside my husband. John kept his promises to love, honor, and protect me by refusing to be memorialized on his family plot unless I could be eventually by his side, where I'd been for almost 21 years. What a statement of commitment. Jim, I don't want a memorial without you beside me. Yeah, I was pretty damn lucky to have him in my life. In a way, it's fitting that John and I got married on a plane. In a previous job, I traveled on business almost every week. I felt like I was constantly on an airplane. At the point the wheels left the runway on takeoff, I would close my eyes, think of John, and say to myself, I love you, baby. Be home soon. It was yet one more promise I made to him. A few months after John died, I found myself on an airplane waiting on the runway for takeoff. When the wheels left the ground, without thinking, it was my tradition after all, I immediately closed my eyes and thought of John. And then I promptly fell to pieces. I realized I could no longer promise to come back to him, but I could still promise to love him and honor him. I still do that. I closed my eyes and made those promises when I left Cincinnati yesterday, and I'll make them again tomorrow when I leave Houston. I make those promises every single day. I wish he were here to see how far we've come. This June, we could be celebrating marriage equality coast to coast. What a joyful day that will be, one many of us never expected to see. But we have to remember, marriage equality isn't the prize. As HRC knows, it isn't the end of the fight for the LGBT community. It's a step. a very significant step and one worth celebrating, but still just one step on our path to full equality as Americans. John and I were very lucky. My family loved John, and John's family loves me. We weren't kicked out of our homes. Our families never tried to fix us. We never lost a job because of who we were. We never felt the need to hide our relationship out of fear. We were never denied service in a business, and we were never physically attacked for the way we were born. Leela Elkhorn couldn't say that. Matthew Shepard couldn't say that. Harvey Milk couldn't say that. Many of you in this room can't say that. And far too many of our brothers and sisters across this country can't say that. That's why I'm proud to stand with the Human Rights Campaign. That's why I'm proud to be a Federal Club member. We have to stand up, not just for ourselves, but for every LGBT person who has lived a life of fear, not knowing the joy of living the true life they wanted or deserved, or, worst of all, lost his or her life or took his or her own life because others were blinded by hate. I'm humbled to be able to play a small part in moving that fight forward. When I walk up those Supreme Court steps in just a couple weeks, I make all of you 3 promises. I do. I promise to love everyone in the LGBT community, my community. I promise to protect you by standing up and fighting for our rights. I promise to honor you by respecting and celebrating what makes us different while at the same time makes us the same, our humanity. We, all of us, are worth fighting for, and it's the greatest honor of my life to be here tonight in John's memory. Thank you all very much.